thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for Wealthy and Wise. I'm your host, Adam Kente, and I have with us today a very special guest. I was just talking to Damien, and we were figuring out that Damien and I have known each other now for 20 years, over 20 years, in helping business owners. And Damien, you've done a great job over the years of not only setting up your own businesses, but helping entrepreneurs and investors with their own business. And we had a great topic lined up today, which we're talking about common mistakes that people make. And I'm a big fan of learning from others' mistakes, try and prevent from making those myself. But today the plan is to talk about, with forming LLCs and corporations, you see so many videos on YouTube or Instagram, all of the social media, all of the advertisements where these are a do-it-yourself type of thing where you can just form your own company, and boy, is that easy. So we're going to talk to Damien today about the common formation mistakes, not only from a tax standpoint, but from a legal standpoint as well. And hopefully this will be fairly entertaining for you. So Damien, so number one, when people form LLCs, what is the number one mistake you think they make?
Number one mistake? Well, I would say probably they don't have all the right paperwork in order. So they have to go back and sometimes have to resubmit documents because they may have missed something. So I think that's one of the most common, is just that sometimes paperwork is missing or it needs to be corrected. Yeah,
so that's interesting that you said that as number one, because I remember a few years ago, it was in December, and I had a client that I was following up, and he said, well, Adam, I'm just going to go ahead and form this thing on my own. So he formed his LLC. He filed his articles of organization with the Secretary of State. And he called me back a few weeks later. He said, Adam, I'm trying to buy a piece of property right now, and I don't have an operating agreement. Mm-hmm. And the title company will not let me close on this property without the operating agreement. And ended up costing, he called a local attorney because it was the holidays. Good luck. They said there was no way they were going to get the operating agreement done for him before the property closed. So thankfully we were able to help him out, but it cost me more to just do that operating agreement than if I had just formed the company and done it right to begin with. So that is an important piece, is having the right paperwork. And when do you think people really find out that they don't have the required pieces?
It always comes up at the most inopportune times, naturally. It's when you're in the middle of getting something accomplished for your business, and then you have somebody at the state level, at the county recorder's office, or you have somebody like an attorney, something ask you for some documentation. You're like, oh, wait a second, I actually don't have that. Or here's a good one. I just had a similar situation you just had, like an operating agreement. We had somebody who went to the bank and they didn't have their EIN number with the Internal Revenue Service and for them to open their bank account. So the operating agreement, the EIN, these are documents that, you can form your own company. Yeah, sure, you can file with the state, but there are other things other paperwork that you will need in order to properly function. So yeah, that operating agreement's a really important piece. And one of the things that, really good about not doing it yourself, of actually getting a business to help you incorporate, is you definitely want to find somebody who actually provides an operating agreement for you. Like for us, as you're aware, that we provide operating agreements for all the entities that we structure, and they're good in all 50 states. So that's a very, very important aspect, because as you grow, you also want to make sure your documentation is in order that will be sufficient for that growth. And so you don't have to keep looking back at your company. You want to memorialize it. And so as you're growing, you're focused on your future success as well. So the operating agreement, the EINs, these documents that come secondary, these are all very, very important to maintain a properly functioning entity.
Which is important. The other thing I was thinking about is from a standpoint of somebody gets involved in a lawsuit or they get audited, mm-hmm. and I look at all the new IRS auditors that are being hired in, 87,000 of them, and we start looking at things that become very important, like the paperwork. Is your LLC properly formed? Have you been commingling funds? I see that as another common mistake. So tell me about how commingling funds can hurt your business from a tax and legal standpoint.
Oh, commingling funds is very bad. You definitely don't want to do that in your business. Commingling funds, basically, it's kind of a good way to understand it, is you don't want to mix your personal funds with your business funds. So you want to keep those two things separate all the way down the line. You want to do that because one of the benefits of actually incorporating, why people even do it in the first place, is for liability protection, asset protection, things like that. But you want to separate your liability from you personally, from your business. Now, if you're using personal funds and paying off business expenses with personal stuff and paying off personal stuff with business expenses, that's commingling, and you want to avoid that as much as possible. The operating agreement that you're talking about actually outlines rules and responsibilities for your business that helps separate those two as well. So you actually have rules in place to keep that, but you definitely don't want to commingle funds. That's another really important aspect to the benefits of actually hiring professionals who are in the industry, or coaches or mentors, as opposed to a do-it-yourself system, which you can do it yourself, of course, but when it comes to setting up your business, this is a very, very important step that you want to take in your business life. It's critical, and so you want to make sure that that foundation is strong, and you don't want to mess that up. You want to minimize as many mistakes as you possibly can. So I would highly suggest not commingling, and you can always ask questions. Ask how the business environment works, so you make sure you're not doing that. And this is where the coaching, the mentoring comes in as well. For when you're looking to start up your business, try to find places like ourselves that actually provide those type of services for you, so that way you avoid the commingling of your funds within your business.
That's a great point. So the other another common mistake is talk about naming your business, because I know that naming your business, as menial as it may seem, is very important for certain aspects of what you're going to be doing with the business. So what are some common mistakes in naming a business? Yes,
and that's another very, very important aspect. So you definitely want to name your business something that's relevant into the model and the business that you're within. You don't want to name, if you have like an e-commerce business, you don't want to name it like out of a real estate business, for example, right? You want to make sure it's tailored and specific to the industry that what you're in. And another reason why that's important too is because as you're growing your business and you're dealing with a customer base, you want it to be relevant to the services you're providing. So if somebody were to come across you and see the name of your business, you want it to be relevant to your industry, so that way it helps you, generate those leads as well. And also another thing too is as you get successful, you're eventually going to start building credit and things like that on your business. And so you want all of those pieces to match nicely, because you're going to have a website. There's so many different aspects to growing your business. You want everything to be uniform and everything to be under one umbrella that's very specific to your needs.
So I've heard that there are certain words that we try and avoid that banks don't like to see. And what are some words that are, faux pas, where a bank might look at the name and say, nah, not going to loan money to that guy?
Well, actually, there's quite a number of them. Actually, there's names too that require licenses as well. So there are restricted names, so you have to be careful of that. But you don't want to use like consulting. There's certain words that you want to try to avoid. But again, that's where you want a mentor. You want somebody to help you walk you through those to make sure that you do pick the right name for your business. There are restricted words. Every state's different, so it's harder to kind of answer that. Only because some states require you to have, like I said, licenses. Some states don't. But what we try to do is pick a name that is specific, yet it could be used in all 50 states if possible as well, because we want to see you grow. We want to see you succeed in your business.
So, for example, New York, I think the restricted word is in financial. That word financial in New York is a prohibited word, that you could use it, but you have to get approval from the Department of whatever, banking and lending in New York, or things of that nature. Whereas if you have certain words, I had a client probably 15 years ago. He was starting a business. It was called Love University. And he was teaching clients how to have better relationships. So Love University. Well, the problem wasn't the word love. The problem was the word university, and he literally, we tried to submit the word university, the state kicks it back. No, got to be an accredited school to use that name. So that quickly turned into something else. I can't remember what he finally came up with, but wasn't the word university. There are certain words that are restricted, such as that as well.
So common mistakes, you want to avoid those kind of things. Because here's another part what you're bringing up with that, is I had a similar situation happen recently where somebody put, they used the word financial because that's what caused that. They used the word financial, and they spent a lot of money on their marketing. And they did, they had all paperwork, they had website, they had everything all done before they actually set up their business. And then they found out that they couldn't actually use that word. It was a restricted word. And so they spent all this money on the marketing side, and then just to come to the end to find out, oh wait, you actually can't use that word in what you're trying to accomplish, and so everything had to be unwound and redone. And that's one of the things we're trying to avoid. When you're a new business, you want to stay focused on growing and succeeding and just aiming for your goals and memorializing those. Make sure you're recognizing the achievements in which you're doing. But if you constantly hit roadblocks and constantly have to keep taking a step back, these are all distractions from actually you reaching your business goals and actually succeeding in those. So that's another reason why we want to remove those obstacles for you. That education is extremely important. You having the business idea, you having that is one of the most important parts of it. But also you need to make sure that you're protected, because it is asset protection, tax savings. These are all important aspects, and that's another thing too. By the way, not to kind of change the subject here, but I do want to mention that also doing it yourself. Some people don't actually consider the tax ramifications as well, because there's different tax elections that you can make, right? If you're active or you're passive, like the LLC. If you're active in the LLC, the 2553 form with the IRS, you may not even know about that if you're do-it-yourself. You may not know you can elect to be an S.
Hang on for 1 second. So you say 2553, and
Right.
for our audience out there listening, so what is a 2553?
So what that is, it's an IRS document that allows you to request a tax election. That tax election then gives you the approval. You file a 2553 form, and it gives you the approval to be taxed, let's say, as an S corporation. So instead of having let's say, a disregarded entity where it flows to your personal tax return, you actually can file what's called an 1120, not 1120S. Not to get too far afield, but these tax situations are important to consider, because you want to maximize your benefits, because you do get advantages when you incorporate. That's one of the reasons why people do that, is because we get benefits from that. And so we want to make sure that you want to look at your tax ramifications, your tax elections, because you want to make sure you're benefiting the most from the law, and that those laws are written for you on purpose, so you take advantage of those in the right ways. And that's the reason why we want to consider those things when we are incorporating. What is the right tax selection for me, for my business, and what I'm trying to accomplish?
So in forming a corporation, we have president, secretary, treasurer, director.
Mm-hmm.
For LLCs, we have managers, members, and managing members. What's a common mistake that you see when people are forming, because now everything is LLCs nowadays, so when they form an LLC, what's a common mistake you see in just putting that together?
This is a very, very common one that I see almost all the time. And what happens is that because there's three different designations, like you mentioned, there's the manager, the managing member, and the member. Each one of those actually represents a different part of responsibilities within an LLC. So one of the things I like to mention is that when you are doing your own LLC, understand the differences between those three roles. And if you are a member, technically that's an owner. If you are a manager, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're an owner. It could mean that you're an owner, but doesn't 100% mean that. So it actually benefits you when you go on public record, because when you file your entity, you actually have to file with the state and the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State will accept that. And when you do that, there are states that require you to list who the managers and members are, and the owners are of the LLC. So what we do, because we've been doing this for over 30 years, is we like to suggest that you go on as a manager. That's one of the things, not in every situation, there's always exceptions, but a manager is one that we like to recommend, only because that could mean a lot of different things. And we want to make it as difficult as possible for liability reasons. Anybody who's prying eyes, trying to come after your assets, trying to look at what you own, we want to make it as difficult as possible for them to reach your assets. Doesn't mean they can't reach them. We just like to put these roadblocks up, these obstacles up, because it just benefits our clients an extra level. And so it is important to actually take into consideration, what address do you want to use? What's the names do you want for your entity? And what is your title and your role? Because if you're a member, you're advertising to the world that you're an owner. If you're a manager, that actually has a lot more flexibility.
Well, you hit on one that I think is so important for most people to know, which is the address. And one of the common things when we're forming a company is we have to list a principal business address, and we have to list a registered agent address. And is there anything wrong with putting my home address as the registered agent?
Okay, so There is, yes, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. You can still do that, but that means that now your address is being advertised to lawyers and to the world of exactly, who you are, where you live, and if you have assets in there, you're just advertising, your big advertising sign. The registered agent, you will have to have one, and all entities have to have a registered agent. Yes, technically you can be your own, but it's really important to actually have like a commercial registered agent or somebody who's a responsible party to be there for you as your registered agent, because the address, you can use your registered agent's address to go on public record, which gives you another extra level of protection, because the registered agent address is actually listed on public record. Doesn't mean that that's not your business address. It's just that's just a shield, if you will, to protect you, because you are paying that registered agent to be your service of process in the event that there's a lawsuit. There's other reasons why you have a registered agent. One is also for the inspection of reports in case something were to take place. Your registered agent is responsible for having documentation on record to make sure that that entity is filed correctly with the state, things like that. And also another important point I'd like to make: when you're your own registered agent, you may forget or may not know when it's time for renewals, or you may not know when you have to do any resolutions, amendments, and minutes, anything like that. Those are all important documents that you have to do in order to maintain and memorialize your journey in your business. That registered agent will be the person who will actually reach out to you and let you know when your renewals are due, so you don't go into what's called default or delinquent status. Because once you start going into those things, you don't have that registered agent to be there to hold your hand and make sure that you're filed and always current and active with the state. The state will actually impose late fees and things, and this could be very costly for people. And so it's worth to pay for a registered agent because the fees for the state sometimes could be the same, if not more, than what it would cost per year to have a registered agent. So those are other aspects that I think they're really important to consider. But I always highly recommend having an actual commercial registered agent, or somebody to be that for you instead of being your own, because there's so many things that you can miss. And another thing too, I know we talked about this earlier, and not to get too much information, but when you are when you are growing your business, every state requires different documents, and your registered agent actually is that person who's to make sure that you have the right documents sent to the right states and you're not missing anything. And it's important that you you have that way to communicate with somebody to find out exactly what you need in those states to register and make sure you don't go into default, because like I said, the fees could really add up. So not to talk too long about that, but I think that's a really important aspect to your business.
Good. In addition, you start forming comments. I had a lady today that called that is buying property in Alabama, and she gets a notification that she has a special tax that she's got to pay because she owns property and has a business operating there. So what's that mistake that people make when they start getting all these documents in the mail and they don't know what to do? What do most people do?
They put it in the round file, they throw it in the trash, they file it away, and they forget about it, and all of a sudden these notices keep coming, just keep showing up, and then they don't really know what to do.
So bottom line is that there's a lot of little mistakes, and these seem to be little things that add up in a big way. And for most people that have formed their own companies, they're never going to know what pieces they're missing or what things that they should have had until they get sued or they get audited, and that's a heck of a time to find out you're missing things. The IRS, for example, won't allow you to go back and create a miles log. You have to create that along the way. They will notice and see these things. So super important that things are done the right way in the beginning. I think putting those things together with help from NCH and your team, Damien, is just a great way to make sure you're doing things right to avoid those little common costly mistakes that really add up in a big way. So thank you so much for tuning in today with Wealthy and Wise. I'm your host, Adam, and Damien, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining us.